Okay, what if I told you there's a secret yogic technique, one so extreme it was guarded for centuries, that promised to literally conquer death itself? Well, today we're cracking open the secrets of something called Khechari Mudra.
But first, let me ask you, seriously, what extreme lengths would you go to for immortality? And I'm not talking about fancy face creams or the latest diet craze. No, we're talking about a total, complete conquest of being human.
You see, deep inside these ancient yogic texts, there's this description of a secret technique. They called it a vidya, which means like a profound knowledge. And it promised exactly that, a way to beat disease, old age, and yeah, even death itself.
And this technique is called Khechari, the sky-roaming mudra. The name itself is a huge clue, right? It's from the Sanskrit K, which means sky or ether, and charya, one who roams. So the whole idea is that the yogi who masters this can literally roam free in the vast space of consciousness, completely liberated, all while still living in their body. Wild.
Now, this was knowledge so powerful that the texts themselves warned that it's, and I'm quoting here, difficult to attain. And for a very, very good reason. The whole journey, it starts with an act of just startling commitment. It involves a sharp knife and your tongue. Now, to understand why in the world anyone would even consider this, we've got to rewind and look at the original goal of this whole thing.
So let's get into it. Why would somebody do this? Well, first we have to understand what the ultimate goal of ancient Hatha Yoga even was.
And wow, there's a huge difference here. When you think of yoga today, you're probably thinking fitness, flexibility, maybe a little bit of calm, right? Well, that is a million miles away from the ambitions of the ancient yogis. They weren't just trying to have a better day. They wanted to completely transcend life and death. They were after superhuman powers and actual physical immortality.
I mean, one of the texts, the Yoga Kundalini Upanishad, just lays it out there. This isn't some gentle spiritual exercise. It's a direct, prescribed antidote for anyone, and I quote, at the mercy of death, disease, and old age. I mean, the stakes literally could not be higher.
So, the whole practice, the whole shebang, was designed for one single purpose, to reverse the body's natural decay. And the key to all of this was believed to be this mystical stuff called amrita, the divine nectar of immortality.
Okay, but how? How could a physical technique possibly get you access to some divine nectar? Well, to get that, we have to dive into the yogi's internal universe.
So these ancient yogis saw the human body as this perfect mini version of the entire cosmos. And on their internal map, they pictured a kind of mystical moon up in the head, and it's constantly producing this divine nectar, this amrita. But there's a catch. There's also a sun down in the belly. Think of it as your digestive fire. And as that nectar drips down, the sun just burns it all up. And that process, they believed, is what causes aging, decay, and eventually, death.
So what's the solution? Khechari Mudra. The word mudra means seal, and that's exactly what it is. It's a physical technique designed to jump right into the middle of this internal cosmic process. The idea is, by turning your tongue backward and way up, the yogi creates a physical block, a seal, in the passage above the palate. It stops the nectar from dripping down and stops it from getting incinerated by that sun in the belly.
The logic is pretty simple, right? But actually doing it? Oh, that is anything but. This is where we get into the most intense part of this quest, a 12-year journey to physically transform the human body.
The texts lay out this methodical and honestly pretty grueling process. Okay, get ready for this. First, they make a tiny cut the size of a single hair on the frenulum, that little bit of skin under your tongue. Then, they rub powders, like crushed rock salt, into the wound, not to make it heal, but to stop it from healing. And they repeat this week after week to slowly, deliberately sever that frenulum, all while doing daily stretching, a practice they called milking the tongue to make it longer and longer.
And the timeline here just shows you the insane level of commitment we're talking about. After 6 months of this, the frenulum is just gone. After 3 years of stretching, the tongue can now reach the center of the eyebrows. But for complete success, the texts say it takes, wait for it, 12 full years. At that point, the tongue is supposedly long enough to reach the very crown of your head. I mean, just think about that dedication.
So after all that, what's the payoff? What's the reward for this unbelievable ordeal? Well, after all those years of prep, the yogi can finally perform the mudra, seal up that passage, and for the very first time, taste immortality.
And the texts get super descriptive about it. They say the yogi tastes the nectar and it's very sweet, cool, pleasant, milk-colored, and free from froth. Sounds pretty good, right?
And the results? They're supposed to be immediate and just profound. By drinking this amrita, the yogi becomes free from wrinkles, from gray hair. They're cured of all disease, and they're no longer subject to getting old or dying, period.
But believe it or not, conquering death is just the beginning. The real climax of this whole quest is getting what are called siddhis, which are basically godlike supernatural powers.
The texts lay out this absolutely stunning timeline for what happens next. After just 2 months of drinking the nectar, the yogi knows the meaning of all sacred texts. 4 months in, omniscience. You know everything. And then, it gets even crazier. At 9 months, you can become invisible. At 10 months, you can shapeshift, assume any form you want. And by the 11th month, you know the past, the present, and the future. You become, as the text says, like Shiva himself.
Okay, but if you look back at that timeline, there's one number that really jumps out: 6. After just 6 months, and think about this, this is before you get the invisibility or the shapeshifting, the yogi is said to become a jivan mukta. And what that means is a soul that has achieved complete liberation while still living. That was the real spiritual peak of this whole practice.
But it's super important to know, this wasn't like the only way. Not everyone agreed on this. There was a big philosophical debate going on here. You see, a lot of other yogic paths were all about austerity, about drying up the body's fluids to get spiritually pure. But Khechari, it had the exact opposite goal. It was all about preserving and basically flooding the body with that divine nectar.
And that leaves us with the big question, right? Is Khechari Mudra a literal physical instruction manual for gaining divine power? A step-by-step guide to becoming a god on earth? Or is all of this a really profound and complex metaphor for an inner transformation? You know, a way of describing something purely spiritual, but using the language of the physical body. The texts, well, they kind of leave that for us to figure out.